Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first session on preventive wellness at the workplace. And joining me is Dr. Bhavna Gautam, my partner in Rachna Restores and my bestie and an emotional well-being expert. So thank you, Dr. Bhavna, for
Hi, Rachna. Thank you so much, and very excited to be back on a platform discussing such important topics with you.
yeah. So you and I have been through this last 18 months
Yes,
has been so challenging with the corporates, with employees, and so many of our clients are struggling with the mental well-being. So,
right.
as a mental well-being expert, your inputs are going to be very valuable on the linkages to their lifestyle. So, do
Absolutely.
you
And
want
not
to?
just them, we too, right? We faced our own set of challenges. I think there was a lot of learning from your own personal journey through the whole thing.
True, very true. Dr. Bhavna and I have been working with a lot of corporates, and we have realized that during this time, there are so many studies that are coming out which are linking the nutrition to the mental well-being, and some of the corporates have worked with us on helping the employees work from home better with calmer minds and this is our inaugural session to spread the awareness of the experiences that we have had, and also as health experts, how you can learn from these examples as well as from HR leaders on what they did to empower their employees in COVID times and still be on top of mental well-being, emotional well-being, and nutrition. You want to add something, Bhavna?
No, I think you put it perfectly. While working with individual patients, this was just a very natural transition to happen because these are the young people who form the bigger workforce with corporate. So hence the linkage with our one-on-one patients and then going to a bigger audience, which becomes your corporate employees. So yes, we look forward to this journey. We've had some amazing experiences with a couple of corporates in the last 18 months, and we look forward to doing more work in this space.
Yeah, so the kind of stuff that we have been doing, and now we are getting more into it because we are getting such a huge demand.
Right.
Just wanted to share with everyone that we do health risk assessment for employees via diagnostics, and we are happy to say that these diagnostics are at cost. So the padding that most diagnostic labs have, they have been kind enough to waive that off for our patients as well as for employees of corporates. We've started running the preventive health 10-day detox because that works so beautifully in just starting anybody who wants to start the process of getting healthy. Bhavna has specially spearheaded the mental well-being workshops, and we've been doing women's health and senior management workshops with corporates. And there is a special focus on COVID prevention, comorbidities, and vaccine essentials. It's a new world that we are dealing with. We have to adapt for the next 18 to 24 months. Things are not going to change when we look at this scenario. Expected outcomes that we have already started seeing is that efficiency in this changed world is getting better. There is health risk reduction via all the above. And when I say health risk reduction, there are these emergencies which happen due to comorbidities,
Right.
which we are beginning to avoid. Of course, if you avoid the emergencies, then there is lower absenteeism and higher productivity. And ultimately, it links back to happier and uh, uh, more efficient, more productive employees. Because remember that study, Bhavna, that we did,
Yes.
we read about, we put it up on LinkedIn also
Right.
on how happier employees is linked to higher productivity. And I just love the way that they had put that
Yeah.
data out.
And I think the way this entire program, the entire preventive health program for corporates was designed by our team, took into essence the fact that COVID has brought to light the bigger impact that your own immunity plays rather than what the healthcare system can do for you. So once you know that a bigger chunk of responsibility lies with you, all these things which are being offered as part of the corporate wellness program just sort of make sense. So some of it is customized. The diagnostics will reveal to you your own personal health challenges. Whereas there are certain elements which are more generic. For example, the detox program probably applies to each one of us, including you and me, Rachna. We know that we go through these phases where we know that, okay, now probably the toxicity levels have reached a little, critical point, and we need to do the 10-day detox for ourselves.
Yes.
So that's the entire science behind the way we design the corporate wellness program. And each element, the nutrition, the mental and emotional well-being, you cannot separate any from one or the other. We realized from our experience, and that's the reason probably why we collaborate so well, is the fact that at the end of the day, it's the whole human you're dealing with. So a happier employee comes from a happier physically healthier employee, an emotionally healthier employee, a socially healthier employee. So productivity again being linked to all of these factors. Hence, the entire whole human approach is what was the foundation of the corporate wellness program.
No, no, absolutely. So well put. And you've been one of the spearheading minds behind it. And in our inaugural session, we are very, very grateful for our first guest to be Ruchir Jingran. He is Vice President HR for ITC Limited. ITC has had a series of workshops, where preventive health programs, as well as they really look after their senior management. I have,
I think they've
seen
been
that.
very proactive. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. So without any delay, I'm going to just welcome Ruchir to join us. Hi, Ruchir. Thank you so much.
Hi. Thanks, Rashna, and thanks, Dr. Bhavna, for having me here.
Great, Ruchir. So, you are so proactive about the kind of workshops, the kind of initiatives, and I also see a lot of this activity in your senior management where everyone is on top of it, because
Right.
preventive health helps us deal with the emergencies much better. So, what drives this?
So, Rashna, let me answer this question not just from the COVID context. Of course, that accentuated a lot of things.
Yes.
But if you look at how we are, whilst it's a large organization, but culturally, we have always been a very people-centered organization. And relationships and a relational culture play an important part. So even if one goes and speaks to people who may have worked with ITC in the past, one thing that everybody will vouch for is about the caring nature of the organization. And I think that comes from a very holistic approach that we take to well-being. And like Dr. Bhavna was mentioning earlier, that we also look at a wellness from a perspective of physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, and even spiritual wellness. And when I say spiritual wellness here, it is more in terms of being a part of a purpose-driven organization, and hence having a sense of purpose at your work. And all these, together help in well-being. Only one of these does not help. So there are various things that we have been doing. Therefore, whether it is having multiple touch points, having sounding boards, both within the units and outside. We not only have a very generous medical reimbursement policy, which is more reactive because it's taking care of financial part of the medical expenses.
Right.
But we are one of the very few organizations, and I'm not sure if there are organizations of our size which do it, which have very clearly laid down practices of doing preventive health checkups based on your age. Most organizations have a health checkup mandated prior to joining them.
Yeah.
But ours is not restricted only prior to joining. It's for the family, which is basically the manager, the spouse, and 2 children. That depending upon the age of the manager, the frequency of those tests and the battery of tests that the person needs to undergo is decided by our in-house doctors, who also help us in. So if you are 30, then there is a certain frequency. If you've crossed 40, then there is a certain frequency, which is, more regular. And also the tests that you need to undergo also change based on age and so on. Now, all that is focused at preventive, because the whole idea is that, and then we have doctors locally, resident doctors in each of our units. So once the report happens, doctors counsel and discuss and advise the employee or his or her manager, spouse, in terms of what changes they need to take preventively to kind of course correct depending upon the nature of reports and so on.
So I can see, yeah, a lot of thought process has gone in ensuring that it gets covered right from starting with an insurance plan to actually supporting the health of the employee. So I think that's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Absolutely.
What struck me in this entire thing is the fact that every organization, we look at the medical aspect
Yeah,
to be able to step back and understand. You invited us to do workshops with you,
yeah,
and look after some aspects of health for some of your employees. For an organization to understand the impact of clinical evidence in nutrition, which is a non-medical area, in
yes,
emotional well-being, which is still not recognized by organizations, that it really touched us. And as a leader in this segment, that's one thing that we as an HR leader stand up and talk about, and then invite people like us with our backgrounds to help employees. So what prompted you to do that versus just sticking to the medical aspect part?
So, like I said earlier, that since our approach was even before the pandemic more holistic, and
right,
medical was also just one example in the overall scheme of things, so we make sure that there are avenues of physical fitness and other forms of well-being, availability of counselors, through a dedicated helpline. We have a theme called Living Well, and that Living Well theme is the theme under which we, across our businesses, we have various interventions, and it's a very segmented approach. So it's not everything that is done centrally. There are certain things that we do centrally, but also obviously HR teams working closer with the businesses will
yeah,
have a better sensing of what works with a
for them.
particular segment of
Yes,
employees.
yes,
But the overall theme, so that mentally also we are anchored on the Living Well theme. Our interventions are, so when obviously pandemic happened, then a lot of this got accentuated. So the need was to focus more on these interventions and do it more periodically. So besides making sure that people use our employee assistance programs, we also realize that a lot of people, so see, we are a manufacturing and sales organization. So we were living in a duality where we had people, there were two kinds of stresses. One stress was that there were people working from home, right?
right,
And Rachna would know about it. She mentioned about it also in her session, for example. A lot of them did not have any domestic help available.
yeah,
So and there was so much of talk about immunity. You were hearing so much that, so we felt that it is important for us to educate all our employees and ourselves, for people to get a better understanding beyond the headlines of building immunity. Similarly, we had people who were working in our manufacturing units and sales, who actually were our frontline warriors and did not have the option of working at home,
working from home. Yeah,
but they were facing a stress of different kind. Besides the challenges of not having help at home, uh, they were facing a stress of that, risking themselves to be at work, risking their families. So what we felt was that besides taking care of emotional well-being, it's important for them to also look at physical health from a nutrition point of view, and also break certain myths that it's not that having a good diet or having a balanced diet or having a nutritious diet can only be restricted to a certain section of people. It is actually very basic, and it is more about knowing the right thing, and it can be done without with very minimal changes in your lifestyle. And it's not about being able, having access to a certain kind of products and so on and so forth. So really, Rashna, that was the trigger point. And what fitted in well was that we were doing a series of webinars for our employees. uh, for example, we called people who were from Nimhans for and the idea was obviously that when you are looking at mental well-being, it has to be non-intrusive. The idea was not to get into a personal space of an individual, and yet have a least common denominator which will appeal to everybody, and provide people to link back to them and ask them personal questions on a one-to-one basis later. So similarly, we thought that this is an important aspect, and in that whole approach of looking at things from a proactive manner, uh, uh, it's not just about doing a session on mental wellness or just doing a session on physical wellness. So we tied up with Art of Living, for example, to do sessions on holistic yoga and fitness, which ran for almost a couple of months on different days of the week. So I think overall, it helped us add comprehensiveness and completeness to various aspects of well-being. And I think nutrition is an important part of that. And it was received quite well. And in fact, which is why we did another follow-up one based on requests internally from the employees.
Yes,
So
I
that was
remember.
really the trigger, Rachna,
Yeah,
for doing it.
I remember, Ruchir, the first immunity boosting session that we did, we expected 60, 70 people, which is what normally happens
General.
in a corporate. Obviously, you had done so much, conversation around it internally. It went over 300, or was it more?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
in fact about 500 plus in the first one.
Yeah, in
yeah.
fact, Rashna, I was just coming to that, interacting with, your employees, we could see the fact that you talked about the culture. The way they engaged with us, it comes from the culture which has been driven over all these years. It was not some piecemeal thing that happened. And because we've done so many corporate work, we realize companies which suddenly try to do something like this, and companies which have an inherent culture of ongoing wellness work, there's a difference in the way your employees approach. So that
Right.
is very, very evident.
In fact, we have some brands in our foods team which also focus on immunity besides other aspects of. So there is a lot of internal communication that also happens to our employees, educating them about our foods brands and how some of those brands specifically focus on immunity. So, for example, after the pandemic, we were able to do a quick tie-up with Amway, which collaborated with our juices brand, Be Natural, basically to have a juice which also has some immunity boosters. So in that sense, there is the degree of understanding and awareness levels are slightly higher. So when we had this option of inviting you to take a session, in that sense, there was already a lot of acceptance, and people wanted something like that, to be taken for them.
Right. So now coming to this with everything, I mean, you've talked about so many vast things that you have done, the organization has done and implemented in the areas of health and well-being. I'm sure you're collecting data around that. So is there any one example that you can give which can be inspirational to people who are watching this on, it could be a particular employee, it could be a group which has been impacted by a specific health initiative, which has some tangible results.
Right. So I don't know whether it will be possible for me to really give a tangible result, because we have also been cautious of giving it some time to happen. And but what I can vouch for, and I'll give some tangible examples also, but is the testimonials that we have got from people, okay, based on some of these sessions, not just the nutrition sessions, but for example, I spoke about. So we ran a series of webinars on mental well-being, and it was not just a webinar, but it was very appropriately themed and calibrated. So we started with fatigue, because it was in a period where lockdown was at its peak. uh, uh, People did not have the option of having help at home. It went on to resilience, stress, and the last one was grief. So, and it was thought through, and there was a reason why we did grief as the last one, and fatigue as the first one. Now, all of us, particularly in the second wave, have got impacted some way or the other. Some people have lost immediate family members, some have lost close, near and dear ones. So from the very testimonials that our team received here, I can tell you that it helped people not just be back at work from a work point of view, but be themselves. And besides other things, some of those sessions helped them. And therefore, one tangible output is the fact that the person was physically and mentally back at work, and had come to terms with whatever he or she had faced. There are people who have benefited from, for example, by taking up the nutrition uh, tips, in terms of either being more fit, having, I mean, some people had taken up, goals for losing weight, more from a nutrition point of view and not going after a particular kind of diet. So I would still call them as very tangible results. And the other tangible results is that we also keep tracking some data for our, we have this initiative called Wellbeing on the Web, right? So I think once we did these series of webinars and sessions, uh, not just in terms of the number of people who registered on Wellbeing on the Web, that also went an inflection, reached an inflection point, but also the services that they were using in terms of queries, reading periodicals and newsletters on nutrition or on physical fitness, all that went up from what it was before we started doing these sessions.
That's wonderful. That's really, considering how large your organization is,
Yes.
this makes a huge impact. When you look at numbers, it is, if you boil it down to every individual, when you were talking about that whole thing which led from fatigue to grief, and Dr. Bhavna and I have seen so much of this. Our entire team, has seen so much of this entire span of fatigue to resilience to grief in the last 18 months. We've all lost near and dear ones
Yes.
in this time. So hats off to you, and let's hope
I
that
think that's one of the best formatted group or mass support system for a corporate that I have seen. So Ruchir, hats off. I mean, to you and your team for actually going. This requires a lot of empathy and a lot of thoughtfulness to even
Right.
design something like that. So I think that that's absolutely wonderful.
yeah, so this
Thank
brings
you.
me to, Bhavna, you said it very well. It requires a lot of empathy and
Yeah,
thoughtfulness.
yeah.
So, Ruchi, is your beef pharma background, uh, relevant in this?
Yes,
And
that is
that's what led
something
you
we
to do
discovered.
it?
We discovered this, and we were like, we need to catch you on this particular topic.
Yeah.
Uh, no, I have never thought about it like this, to be very honest with you, because I think as an organization, we have a lot of people who are very empathetic, irrespective of their, background, and I think it's part of our culture that teaches you that way. I have, now spent almost 18 years in the organization, and the way I have experienced people who were senior to me or who mentored me, and the way I have, seen people being empathetic, I think it has grown on me also in some sense organically, and that's how I see people around me also. And there are lots of people, of course. All organizations have got different kinds of people and so on, but I think we have more people of this kind. And one thing which helps, and which has helped is, of course, not just the HR people, but people who have been at the forefront in terms of being sounding boards, but definitely the HR fraternity also, because from an organization's perspective, they have been the frontline leaders in terms of the caregiving role, to be there at all times. And at such times you can't have a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 7 clock. It's been Sundays, Saturdays, 12 o'clock in the night, somebody needs help. So and I'm sure both of you can relate to what I'm saying. So I think what has helped is having people who are empathetic, and also people who are therefore very, very patient and active listeners, because sometimes all help that you can give, or the only help that you can give to a person who is suffering, is just listen. The person is not necessarily looking to you, up to you, for a solution or something that you may offer, but just being there, and just being there to listen to the person itself makes a, and it's been a part of our culture. And that's why I said that that for us, it was a challenge, yes, like for everybody else, but it wasn't something that we had to completely do out of the ordinary to kind of work out on how does this work, and so.
No, this is really wonderful, and it then boils down to the same thing that Bhavna was also talking about. It's the culture of
Right.
the company.
The culture.
You
Yeah.
had a mentor who you looked up to and who had high empathy, and then you followed through with the same, and then you are teaching. You're probably mentoring other HR next generation leaders who are going to follow in your footsteps to do the same. So that's what it boils down to: building an organization of caring for your
Yeah, in fact, just to give you an example, and see, we use like many other organizations, but why I'm giving ITC the example is also because of the size and our dimension, that we have about 11,000 plus managerial employees, and a large non-management employees working in our factories and so on. So we have these town halls by our chairman, and we used to do it in physical format before the COVID, and we used to webcast it. The moment the first lockdown happened last year, we quickly shifted to a online town hall. And it was not about how the business may get impacted, and it was not about, and this was not, you know, these things come from within by part of being a, so if the chairman of such a large organization is giving a message, and this in the virtual format, employees are attending it, their families are also attending it, because anyway everybody was locked at home. And when the message goes from the head of the organization saying that we are there together in it, and we pray and hope that nobody gets infected, but just in case something happens, the ITC family will be there to make sure that we get out of it. I think that set the tone for what happened later, and how everybody, there are so many stories that ex-ITC employees have reached out to ITC friends to take help, whether it is for a bed or for an oxygen cylinder and so on and so forth, because they knew that if you speak to someone in ITC, nobody will, say no for a help of this nature.
Yeah, so
How
now
wonderful.
you're talking about one large organization which has the resources. What are your tips? Just two, 3 points to maybe organizations which don't have the resources that you have, are medium sized, or are large but don't know where to start from.
Right. So, Rachna, I think here, at least on this aspect, I can very confidently say that it is not so much a function of the resources and the size of the organization, because from the conventional definition of resources, uh, it is not a resource rich approach, but the basics of what we were discussing a couple of minutes back in terms of, having the right intent, being empathetic, and having a conviction which starts top down. If that is there, and I'm saying that therefore, whilst there are lots of negatives and lots of learnings from COVID, there are some silver linings also. When you do things in an online fashion, when you use the web and technology, actually it becomes more cost effective. But so it's not so much the cost and the resources, but the right ingredients in place of looking at wellness holistically, uh, having touch points, not just from a transaction or a work point of view, to check in and find out if you are doing well. This does not, it requires investment of time. And therefore, I don't think that it matters whether it's a small organization. In fact, for a small organization, it may be easier to do, because in a large organization, you need to put in place some basic structures and processes, so that it is not completely left to each individual. But in a smaller organization, it is even more simple, because it's a small organization. You will have by default, a good network, but that right intent of that why it is important. It is not a good to do thing. It is a very, very integral part of, it impacts, like you yourself said in the beginning, that and there is a lot of today, people talk about evidence based management, and there is a lot of research with data which says on why it is good for the organization in the long term, and it actually impacts not just organization metrics like productivity, but also financial metrics in the long term. So I think that first principle understanding of why it is important for us is important. You need to have people both in HR and in functional leadership roles who are empathetic and good listeners. If that happens, then I think the other things fall into place. The scale at which one may implement a particular policy or a scheme will obviously be based on the resources that an organization has. But I think all employees and their families are very, very mature, and they understand those aspects if the right ingredients are in place.
No,
I
that's
think
it's
I think
really
that's yeah,
sure.
that's so true. And in our experience too, I think it's the ecosystem finally that you've created, where you may have all the resources, you may even have the intention, but to ensure that your employee feels like he can come to you in his time
Right.
of need.
Right.
That becomes so essential. So whether you're a small organization or a big one, I think it boils down to how much your own employee trusts or has faith in your ecosystem, that listen, I can go back to my company and ask for that kind of help. I think you worked, or you pointed that out absolutely correctly, Ruchir. So I think that is the key in getting such initiatives to even cause the impact that you're thinking of.
Right.
So, for all the HR leader and organizations that are watching this, I just want to summarize what you said in terms of just that two things that they can do to start. So one thing you're saying is that the leaders of the organization need to stand up and demonstrate in their behavior empathy and caring for their employees. Is that right?
Yes.
And the second is that you mentor individuals with your behavior, even in HR, to implement, even if it's two or three policies which will make an impact to their health. Right. So where can somebody give us one point? Where can someone start? Just
So I think one good starting point will be to look at all the four aspects of well-being: physical, mental, emotional, and purposefulness, and speak to the consumers. And consumers, I mean here is that from an HR perspective, it is your employees who are your customers. Look at their age group, look at their segments, understand from them their needs, and then look at interventions which will address those needs across these four, rather than trying to take a ready-made formula which may or may not be required for everybody. So I think it may sound very very basic, but I think to me that from my point of view, I can't think of any other starting point.
no, this makes a lot of sense, because if the organization is a, let's say, a young digital organization with employees whose average age is 27 years old, then these policies are going to be drastically different from an organization which is in the manufacturing sector. So
Absolutely.
yes, so
Absolutely.
And I think for me, my key takeaway from everything that Ruchir said is listen to your employees. I think half the time, if you're listening to them, you will know what you need to do for them. So I think anybody who's heard Ruchir all the while would realize that he listened, or his team listens and then delivers. It is not just a top-down approach where we create something and push it down. So I think the key over here, Ruchir, that you pointed out brilliantly, was listening to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
which is actually the theme across any kind of impact on health. Whether we look at, so Bhavna and I and the entire team at Rachna Restores looks at the vertical of chronic disease management, where we have the doctor-patient relationship with individual people who come to us and sign up. Even over there, the biggest impact, 50% of the impact happens from the empathy factor that you just spoke about, and just listening to
Yeah.
someone who is struggling with either pain or time management or resources, and they feel that there is somebody over there, out there, who understands.
I think the key problem underlying most of our chronic cases that come to us, since we deal exclusively with chronic cases, Rachna, is you would also agree with it that they have felt unheard for a very long period of time in life. The minute you start hearing people out, like that genuine listening, I think half the problems just tend to disappear on their own, because that's all they wanted, somebody to listen. So I think brilliantly put, Ruchir. This was so lovely to hear somebody in HR talk about something which we, even as counselors, therapists, coaches, follow as our principle.
Right.
Yeah, that is why I think it was the best thing to do to have Ruchir here for our inauguratory session on
Absolutely. Now I
predictive
know why
maintenance.
Rachna was insisting, okay, that you've got to do.
No, I am thankful that Rachna invited me, and I hope that you found it useful and everyone
Of
finds it
course,
useful.
of course.
No, everyone is going to find it useful, and we look forward to hearing from you about your inspirational initiatives. Please do share them on your social media or with us, so that this entire initiative is completely to only spread the awareness. You are already aware that we are a social enterprise, we're a non-profit, even though we
Right.
are not an NGO. So anything that can help other organizations
Learn.
impact the
Yeah,
well-being, physical, emotional well-being of their employees, we would be
right.
more than happy to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to do that.
Any last words to leaders?
No, I think I've said enough, and I think the basics are the most important. And if we start from the right basics, then I'm sure we will reach the right destination.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ruchir.
Thank you. Thank you for calling me. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. So wonderful. That was Ruchir Jingran, Vice President HR at ITC Limited. We both heard him talk about uh, the amazing initiatives. Not just, Bhavna, what caught my attention was not just the medical aspect. What caught my
Right.
attention was, what all they have done in mental well-being, emotional well-being, nutrition.
And the fact that they understand it to this depth, right? Like I was quite amazed by that program structure of the emotional well-being, where they spoke about from fatigue to grief. It's really lovely, because generally, honestly, Rachna, when we hear about initiatives like this being taken by corporates, we hear a lot of studies in West or examples of the West. But these are our own, our own companies. These are Indian companies who are taking such initiatives. So I think they're leading by example. And I think the examples that they are setting, again, is not resource centric. It's purely intention centric.
Absolutely, and you pointed out something very key. So it did not happen by design, but the first guest that we have had, leader that we have had, is from an Indian company, and the second one, our next one, is also going to be from an Indian company. And we are going to be talking about, she's also very, very well educated,
Yes.
like Ruchi is. It'll be interesting to see her perspective on this when we interview her next in the next broadcast.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Look forward to hearing from these leaders and
Yes.
these young leaders. Honestly, these are young people, and hearing them out gives you so much of faith in how things are going to change when it comes to your view of health and wellness, right?
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. So with that, I think we come to an end for this particular inauguratory broadcast of preventive well-being in the workplace. Dr. Bhavna and I work very, very closely with corporates and with the people. We have a reasonable following even on our social media. People reach out to us for nutrition, physical well-being, emotional well-being, mental well-being, spiritual well-being. These are the four rooms inside you that you need to
Right.
air every day, and a lot of us don't get time to air these. And we are coming up next month with a mental well-being workshop,
Workshop.
which is going to be led by Dr. Bhavna Gautam. Details will be out soon on that. You want to talk a little bit about that, Dr. Bhavna, before we call it a day?
Yes, I think so. Going with the theme of COVID and the impact of COVID on where we are currently and how do we proceed from here, I think that is going to be the core point of discussion, even with the mental well-being workshop that we have in October, on how do we handle those challenges, how do we come out of this more resilient, and not just resilient, which is with fatigue, but resilience, which is with a bit of happiness and positivity. So look forward to having people join us and take advantage, because this is a new world and you need to equip yourself in a newer way.
Yes, so well put. Absolutely. So the workshop is on October 16th,
Yes.
and we will be putting the link for that in the comment section on YouTube. So if you want to sign up, there are limited seats only. We have only 15 seats physically. We are starting our physical workshops with the
Yes.
mental well-being workshop, and 15 people virtually. The effectiveness of the workshop is high if we keep the number limited.
Look forward to that, and thank you for this brilliant session, Rachna. I really look forward to the upcoming ones.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And you can watch this video again for understanding how HR leaders are implementing preventive wellness and well being for their employees.
Yes.
We'll see you soon with the next one.
Bye bye.
Bye.